All the lifters finally came in from Volvo, got all the sizes I need, and they're all correct. I went ahead and I rechecked all the clearances and everything. So I'm gonna show those to you guys right now real quick. And then we are also gonna start putting in the cams, getting on all the timing stuff. We can start turning this motor over, throwing it on the subframe and getting it ready to go in and start checking for oil pressure, ignition timing, all that fun stuff. So super excited and really cannot wait for this weekend because we basically have a chance to get this thing fired up. So here we go, guys. Here they all are. Missing two because I got those in the head right now because I'm basically going to show you how I'm checking them. But you can just see all these freaking baggies. Like, look, I literally have a baggie of baggies. This is all just Volvo fucking lifters. So many. But, yeah. Checked them. They're looking good. This is my test rig. I just got these clamps, and these just hold these in the journal, so the feeler gauge can't really raise them or anything. But yeah, these ones are pretty good. Let's get the 20 out. Where are you? So I did 0.2 millimeters on the intake, and then you have a 0.03 tolerance either way. So basically the real clearance is 0.17 to 0.23 is where you want them. So it's 0.2, looking pretty good. Nice, and then 0.2. So they're anywhere from 0.17 to 0.23. This one I actually had to get milled down because I couldn't get a small enough bucket. So this one's actually a little bit big. It's closer to like 0.25, 0.27, but that's fine because the specs KM gave me were 0.2 to 0.25 millimeter. And all the exhausts came out perfect. I used the Volvo spec for these, which is 0.4. So they're anywhere from like 0.37 to 0.4. And KM said they can be anywhere from 0.25 to 0.3. I went a little bit looser on the exhaust just because I'd rather go with the Volvo spec than the KM spec because Volvo did, you know, create these motors and whatnot, and I really trust their saying. And the exhaust side is going to get pretty hot with all the power we're making, so I want to have a little extra room for those to expand. But the intake is good, the exhaust is good. We finally have all of our buckets, and we can get this cam cover torqued on now. And I will show that whole process of how we set the cams up. And then throwing on all the sealant, throwing on the spark plug O-rings, get this puppy torqued on, throw the cam gears on, and get this sucker timed, and we can start rotating her, and hopefully nothing freaking hits the intake valves. So hopefully those pistons clear in there. You better clear in there, you little bastards. Where are you? There they are. All right, so here we go, guys. Just want to take a minute to look at how awesome these cams are. Cam really, they do such a great job. There's some really meaty, aggressive lobes. These are machined from solid too. These are actually billet cams. They're not cast like Enem. Enem are cast and they machine them. These are machined from a solid piece of steel, solid piece of billet steel. That's why, you know, you don't see any casting marks and everything's nice and smooth. Very, very high quality cams. All right, time to get these cams installed. We got our Volvo pink anaerobic sealer. I already got the cam cover over here. Already got a coat on this puppy. So next, I also got all the lifters in, and they're all lubed up and in their appropriate positions. I have all 20 in. So now we are going to throw the anaerobic sealer on here, foam roller it around. Then we're going to put in our 5 spark plug O-rings. Don't forget these. People always forget these and they have big oil leaks later. And then we are going to lube up our journals. I also got these cleaned out. Not super critical that these are super clean because they're just cam journals. And then we will get the cams in, get the cover on, and then we'll hand tighten everything down in a sequence. You know, just start slowly torquing it down with pulling the cover down with the bolts, and we'll torque them to 14 foot-pounds. So let's get to it and let's get this sealed up. Let's get our O-rings in, get our cams in over there, and then we also have cylinder 1 at top dead center, true top dead center, and then we're basically going to set the cams up. did I just have a stressful last hour? This guy freaking stripped. And I was like, you know what? I am not taking this whole valve cover off. So what I ended up doing is actually drilling the hole out to 9mm. And then I had to drill the cam cover hole, and then the hole down in the head, I had to drill it out to 9/32, and then I tapped that for a 7mm Healy coil, and then I had to drive the Healy coil in, and I got it to seat and everything, and I got the bolt to tighten down, and oh my God, it was crazy. I actually had to do the same for this oil pan bolt. I had to Healy coil it while the oil pan was on, and you can do it, it works. It took 14 pounds, no problem. So, yay. Glad I didn't have to take this off, but I just threw the belt on super quick, and everything rotates over really nicely. No binding or anything. So you can see, 360, 720. None of the valves are hitting. So, fuck yeah. Now, I'll make a video on how to actually time them properly using cylinder 3. So, we're going to do that. Got the cam seals pressed in. I usually like to put a little bit of white lithium grease around the circumference, and then I can usually just push them in evenly with my hands. And then sometimes I'll give them a little tap with a screwdriver and a hammer just to make sure they're seated very lightly. Same with the front. They're roll in. White lithium grease around the circumference, and then try and slide them in with my hands and fingers. I can usually get them pretty straight, and then finish them off with a couple taps with the flathead just to make sure they're fully seated. And I've done that for 5 or 6 engines and never had a problem. Some people like to get PVC pipe and push them in or whatever, buy the tool, but this works for me, and it'll work for you too if you ever want to try this method. Okay, so the first step of degreeing the cams is going to be to find top dead center on cylinder 3. I chose cylinder 3 because I have the dual oil filler caps, so that means I can put an extension on this dial gauge, and I can actually stick it on one of the lifters, and I can measure the lift, and I can set the cam timing via lift at top dead center. So what I'm going to do is find true top dead center on cylinder 3 using this dial gauge. So I have it hooked up to a TDC finder. It's the same TDC finder I used in my previous video to find top dead center on cylinder 1. And basically what I want to do is I want to crank the engine over until this spins, it stops, and then it's going to start going the other way. And then I will kind of want to do that. I want to figure out where it stops, go a little bit more, and that should be true top dead center on cylinder 3. It doesn't have to be perfect because the cams aren't going to be timed perfectly, but it has to be within 0.1 millimeter or so. So I'm going to go back. So now I'm going to go forward on the engine, and if we look at the gauge, we can see it's spinning. It's spinning. It's spinning forward. And now we can see it stops, and now it starts going backwards. So that means the piston came up, it top dead centered, and then it started going back down. So I kind of want to figure out where it stops. It's right about there is where it stops. I'm going to zero that out, and I'm just going to test this a couple times. So now I go forward. And you can see now it starts going backwards. So I pretty much figured out where I need to be. Forward, and it stops. I go a little bit more, and I'm pretty happy with that being top dead center. So that's what I'm going to use. Okay. So now with top dead center found, I hooked the dial indicator up to the cam lifter, and I put this extension on it. And I also took off the timing belt and released the tensioner. And now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the cam until the valve isn't open at all. And so in order to do that, I'm going to rotate it counterclockwise, right? Because on the intake, we have the opening cycle for the intake valve, and on the exhaust, we have the closing of the exhaust valve. So I'm going to rotate that until this stops moving, and I'm just going to use a long flathead screwdriver, and I'm going to rotate that in between the bolts. And I'm going to move it counterclockwise until that dial indicator stops moving. Now, with that dial indicator stopped moving, that means there is no lift at all on the valve right now. So now I want to do the opposite, and I want to rotate it clockwise until I get 2.5 millimeters which is going to be, I believe, 100 100ths or 100,000ths of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero this out, and now I want to turn the cam clockwise until this rotates a full rotation, and then my cam will be timed at 2.5 millimeters of lift at true top dead center on the intake. So let's rotate it. It's kind of hard to rotate because I got big springs. So there we go. It's moving. I want to rotate it. Rotate it, motor rotate, breaker bar down. Let's see, just want to go a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a hammer, and I'm just going to tap it on the cam gear to get those couple final degrees. So bam, right there. Went a little bit past it. Bam, right there. So that's exactly 100,000 inches of lift, 2.5 millimeters at true top dead center on cylinder 3. And now I'm going to do the same exact thing for the exhaust side, except I'm going to time it to 80 thousandths, which is about 2.5 millimeters. So now you can see I timed the exhaust to 80, which 100 minus, 20. 20 from 0, that's 80. Went 80 this way. So that's all set. So I got my cams timed. They were pretty close. They seemed like they were pretty close to being in time. You can see the slots are actually pretty parallel to each other, meaning the slots are pretty close to the desired timing. So now I got a brand new timing belt. I'm going to put a brand new timing belt on, and I'm going to time it up, and then we'll rotate it over and make sure nothing's hitting. All right, so now basically I got the belt on, and now what I'm going to do to set the tension is you get this little Allen key, and you lock it, and you rotate it past, and then in the center, and then hold it and torque it down to 18 foot-pounds. So I'm going to do that real quick. So I left off, got the timing belt on. I also made some top dead center marks for checking ignition timing, and I also made some marks with the cam gears with the belts, just so I know that it doesn't slip at all. And then I also got my turbo manifold on, and dun, 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 the beast, the myth, the legend. Got that 67 millimeter hole set. I guess actually it's closer to a 69 millimeter with the reduced tip. That thing looks sweet. I guess I'll have to make that my thumbnail. I was gonna make it the cams, but that looks way cooler. And that thing spins like a charm. Other changes I made. I found one of these like 4AN 90s lying around, so I actually put one of those on so that this isn't kinking at all. And now that just runs real nice and clean into the top of the turbo. I got the drain on. I also clocked it. I clocked the, basically what I did is I put the engine stand 11 degrees tilted back because the motor is tilted 11 degrees in the car, and that way I know that my oil drain will be straight down when the engine's in the car on the subframe and tilted back. I guess I can double check that when I put it on the subframe over here, but I think that's pretty good for now. My old compressor housing had like a blue barb on there, but this one already has one on there, so I'm probably just going to leave it. And then I tested the OTE pipe. The placement is a little bit different with this compressor housing. Maybe the casting slightly different, or maybe my clocking slightly different. But it's actually better because it used to hit this, and the pipe used to rub on this, and now it looks like it doesn't hit anymore. So that's good. So I can just play with the silicone in the engine bay over here. Well, I guess the silicone's off there, but yeah, I can play with it on that side. Also put on the cam sensor, cam angle sensor. I got this on. I can put the torque mount on soon. So I'll probably put the torque mount on, and then after that, I'm gonna pull it off the engine stand, and then I can put in the rear main seal, the flywheel, and we can plop it on this here subframe. And then once that's on, we can put on the wiring harness, and we can put on the starter, obviously the transmission and clutch, the alternator, downpipe, basically get everything on. And then we can check for oil pressure. So I'll crank it on the subframe. We can check for oil pressure. We'll check to make sure all the timing is right for the fuel injection and the spark. And then once all that's checked out, we can plop her in the engine bay over here. I'm also gonna put on the suspension, like on the subframe, and put the axles on so that I can literally put everything up in one go. So that's gonna be sweet, and I'm really looking forward to it. And then hopefully we can fire this thing up this weekend because we're pretty much ready to go. I turned the engine over a lot, and it is not, the valves aren't hitting. There's plenty of clearance. Tomorrow I'll get my USB endoscope and I'll check it out, and maybe I'll post a little video of what it looks like in there and make sure there's no nicks or anything. But super excited and can't wait to get this thing checked for oil pressure and whatnot. So here we go, and until next time.